Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Daisy, your hostess. In this video, we continue with the book titled Self-Development, A Handbook for the Ambitious by Addington Bruce. It is in the public domain. If you just found us at this video, I want to say welcome, welcome, welcome. And to our channel subscribers, welcome back. Before I go on with the book, I would like to touch up on a couple points of interest to me regarding the previous chapters. They were both in the last video. They were titled Dream and Do, and the other one was Outside of Business. And they do seem to go hand in hand, and the importance of it as it relates to self-development. I believe that daydreaming is good. And of course, the key formula to a very effective daydreaming is one that we can give it some follow through, because other than that, it's just idle time, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's so wonderful when we can make our dreams, come true. As for myself, I would say that for a very long time, because of my careers in law enforcement and then in helping people in foreclosure and then as a mayor, I had very little time to daydream. And there's a saying, when you can't let the little girl or little boy out and play, it really makes for a really sad person, and really just too much seriousness is not a good thing. The other chapter was Outside of Business. And of course, there's that saying, well, my time is my own. I'm not on the clock. I can go do whatever I want. And if you are not as fortunate as some where money is making you money, then you're stuck either as an employee or you're stuck as a business owner that you're beholden to service. And what happens when the activities that you do have outside of business impede your being able to perform the next day at work? God forbid if you are a truck driver or, a surgeon, and you do occasional drinking and drugs or gambling or staying up late, and then you're not getting enough rest and all these other things that might impede your performance. This may sound odd, but at the end of the day, we are more connected with each other, and we should hold each other accountable, and we should hold ourselves accountable to some standard that would make our lives great and make the lives of those around us even greater. But then again, that's the altruistic side of me thinking, hey, there is a utopia out here. Maybe it's in my mind. I do believe that if we all make an effort for more love, more conscientious compassion and kindness, and as this author mentioned, even decent manners, we can trigger a renaissance of sorts where we can be proud to be humans. And I'm not saying that we have nothing to be proud of, but there is so much room for improvement in so many areas, in abolishing poverty, in abolishing world hunger, in restoring slums, and also in the delivery of quality products and service. And yes, I believe if we can elevate ourselves, each individual person, to be the best version of themselves, I believe that the human race has not seen its zenith. And you know what? Even that is okay, because we are a work in progress. So let's head over to the next chapter titled How Reading Helps. Devote some of your leisure, I repeat, to cultivating a love of reading good books. Fortunate indeed are those who contrive to themselves genuine book lovers. For book lovers have some noteworthy advantages over other people. They need never know lonely hours so long as they have books around them, and the better the books, the more delightful the company. From good books, moreover, they draw much besides entertainment. They gain mental food such as few companions can supply. Even while resting from their labors they are, through the books they read, equipping themselves to perform those labors more efficiently. This, albeit they may not be deliberately reading to improve their minds. All unconsciously, the ideas they derive from the printed page are stored up, to be worked over by imagination for their future profit. Book lovers, too, if the books they love are really good, benefit signally by the increased knowledge they obtain of the correct meaning and the proper use of words, which is a distinct cultural and social advantage to them. It is also a business advantage of no small value. There are thousands of people whose progress in the business world is retarded by their inability to speak and to write correctly. Many cannot spell even simple words correctly, though they have been to school. With reason, employers hesitate to promote such people to positions that involve much oral or written communication with others. When the inability to speak well or to write well is conspicuous, promotion to positions requiring social contacts is virtually out of the question. I like Joe, the employer may reflect. He is honest, faithful, a loyal hard worker. But he misuses language so atrociously that he would be a laughingstock to our customers if I sent him out on the road. I guess he'll have to stick where he is. The reading of books, of good books, is one of the surest ways to guard against being afflicted with such a business handicap as this. Show me a man with a limited vocabulary, weak in grammar, absurdly deficient in spelling, and I will show you one who is almost certainly not a lover of books. And yet again, book lovers are far more likely than other people to have keenness and breadth of vision. Unless their reading is all in one direction, they can hardly suffer from nearsightedness and narrowness of mind, which is another business as well as social advantage to them. It helps to make them sympathetic and tactful. It saves them from many a mistake due to bigotry and intolerance. It prevents them from needlessly making enemies and assists them to win friends. In fine, love of books promotes spiritual as well as intellectual growth. Hence, it may fairly be described as a virtue which all should do their best to cultivate. Hence, also, the old philosopher's advice is as sound today as when it was first uttered. Quote, "Have thy study full of books rather than thy purse full of money." End quote. And hence, likewise, there is a world of wisdom in Isaac Barrow's saying, quote, "He that loveth a book will never want a faithful friend, a wholesome counselor, a cheerful companion, an effectual comforter." End of quote. But, you may say with numerous other people, I like to read, yet truly I don't seem to get much out of my reading. Certainly I can't remember much of what I read. After I have finished a book, it is not long before I have forgotten most of what was in it. How am I to overcome this? There are two principal causes for forgetfulness of the contents of books. One is found in the kind of books read, the other in the way the reading is done. Many people make the mistake of confining the reading to what is known as light fiction. Now, writers of light fiction usually have in view little more than writing books that will be entertaining. They know that their success depends on keeping the reader's interest at a high pitch. To this end, they crowd their pages not merely with a great amount, but also with a great variety of brisk dialogue and exciting, sentimental, or amusing incident. Purposefully, they so construct their stories that the reader is hurried along from the first chapter to the last. Nowhere do they give him a breathing spell. They keep his curiosity aroused. They make him eager to discover how it is all going to turn out. The consequence is that he does not really think about what is in these books. He has no time to fix their contents in his mind, wherefore he cannot remember them. And, to speak frankly, they too often have in them little worth remembering. Which does not mean that light fiction should never be read. On the contrary, it may be read to real advantage under certain circumstances, when wishing to rest the mind, during a recovery from an illness, etc. But to read it to any great extent is a serious mistake. It tends to make distaste for more meaty reading, and it lessens the power to remember what is in more meaty books, if only because a person having the light fiction habit in any marked degree is certain to read all books too fast. Some people, it must be added, can read extraordinarily fast, yet remember well what they read. But they are exceptions. Most people need to read slowly in order to remember lastingly. More than this, they must ponder what they read. Instead of skipping along, they must stop and reflect about the author's statements. If the book they are reading contains any facts, theories, or ideas they especially desire to remember, it will pay them to read these carefully half a dozen times, make written abstracts of them, and talk them over with a friend if opportunity offers. All these are helpful devices for keeping the attention fixed and reinforcing the first impression of the statements read. And there must be fixing of the attention and intensifying of mental impression if certainty of remembrance is to be secured. Read slowly then. Think about what you read. Make notes and abstracts, and talk about your reading. Thus you can be sure of reading to true profit. Another thing, good books should be owned as well as read. Even those in none too fortunate circumstances financially should make themselves owners of books. As the late Arlo Bates once pointed out, nothing is more inspiring to good, straight, intellectual living than a little collection of books in the home. And to continue with Mr. Bates, quote, "Any book that is worth reading once is worth reading twice. And if it doesn't give you greater pleasure on a third reading, the fault is either with you or with the book. The real test of the value of a book is the way it forces you to be creative, to read between the lines and really think." End quote. Besides which, a good book, a really good book, contains so much that it cannot be adequately taken in by a single reading. Also, if read only once, no matter how efficiently read, much of its inspiration and information is likely soon to fade from the reader's consciousness. Accordingly, it ought to be owned so that, in leisure moments, it may be picked up again and again. Thus, its message will be fully and lastingly conveyed to the enrichment of the lives of those who read and reread it. Of course, this does not mean that people should only read books which they can afford to own. Many good books are too expensive to be widely bought, and most people cannot afford to build up a large home library. Consequently, the public library should be used, and used often. But in addition, whenever a book seems to be especially significant, the effort should be made to acquire it as a personal possession. This may involve some sacrifice, but sacrifices made in order that good books may be bought are in reality most profitable investments. There are many ways in which people thoughtlessly waste money. A little reflection will disclose some means of saving for book buying. And good books frequently read and thoughtfully considered always return handsome dividends. If, therefore, your home is now without books, begin at once to start a library of your own. But don't go at this with a rush. Buy your mental food as you would buy food for your body, making an intelligent effort to get only what is really wholesome and nourishing. And put your books in the pleasantest room in your house. Don't stow them in out-of-the-way corners. Keep them together on bookshelves in the room where, because of its brightness and comfort, you most prefer to spend your leisure time. Then you will be the more likely to make frequent use of the books you own and to gain greater profit from them. Buy books. Buy as many good books as you can reasonably afford. You will find your book buying, I reiterate, among the best of all investments. End of chapter. Stay right here as we move on to the next chapter. Before we do, leave me a comment. Let me know what is the best book you've ever read, and what book do you currently have right now on your coffee table or your night table. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the channel. So relax, get comfortable as we move on to the next chapter, and it is titled The Use of Words. Let us return now to a topic of much practical importance, the use of words, to which reference was incidentally made in the enumerating the benefits that accrue from reading good books. One should not, it almost goes without saying, be content with the unconscious improvement of his vocabulary and his power of verbal expression in general that wisely selected reading confers. Conscious effort at improvement should be made also. To do this most effectively, it is necessary first to appreciate the particular defects which the person desiring to improve himself needs most to overcome. Many people, for instance, need not so much to enlarge their vocabulary as to train themselves to be direct and explicit in their use of words. They need to learn the importance of keeping to essentials both in oral and in written expression. This is a truly fundamental principle, but it is one that is violated every day. It is violated even by some educators and psychologists who of all people ought to appreciate its importance. As I was reminded when, not long ago, I listened to a lecture by a psychologist on the subject of nervousness in children. A big subject, and today bigger than ever, for recent research has made some remarkable discoveries regarding both the causes and effects of nervous maladies in childhood. The audience at the lecture in question was not a medical one. There were a few doctors present, but those who came to listen and to learn were mostly laymen, many of them parents and teachers eager to make practical application of what they heard. The lecturer, therefore, had a splendid opportunity to do really important work by making a clear-cut survey of the outstanding results of investigation. Instead, he deliberately chose to expand every point he made by surrounding it with a mass of unessential detail. He heaped fact upon fact in sentences so long drawn that the hearer forgot the beginning of each sentence before its end was reached. Of course, this boresome accumulation of facts made him appear a very learned man. But it also made it impossible for his auditors to follow him either understandingly or attentively. Get down to essentials is the safest rule for all men to adopt in their intercourse with other men. The imposing of an unnecessary strain on attention power is not simply a risky proceeding, it is a foolish one. For the chances are the attention power will refuse to be strained. If only to gain relief, to avoid fatigue, it will turn to something else. Hence the long-winded lecture or sermon, the over-detailed lesson, the business letter that runs to many pages, the business conversation that does not come to the point and stick to it. One and all of these are almost certain to defeat their purposes. Simplicity and directness should govern the construction of every sermon, lecture, letter, or selling talk. This means that real thought must be given to their construction. At every step, the question must be asked, does this statement make my meaning clear, and is it a really essential statement as helping me to attain the purpose I have in view? Any temptation to unnecessary elaboration of ideas must be firmly resisted. Some elaboration, of course, is permissible and may be most desirable, but it must always be elaboration of a kind that will tend to hold the attention to the essential points under discussion, not to distract it from them. Then, too, there are numerous people handicapped in their use of words, not because they do not appreciate the importance of clarity in expression, but because they are not sufficiently familiar with words to be clear. Such people need, in especial, to make systematic use of a good dictionary. And, for the matter of that, few among us use dictionaries to anything like the extent all should. The very general neglect of the dictionary justly observes a modern authority on the psychology of human efficiency is one of the chief defects of present-day learning. This strange neglect is the cause, first, of the surprisingly small diction or vocabulary of which so many educators are everywhere complaining. In the second place, it is in part the cause of lack of power to use good English. In the third place, it is partly the cause of the lack of the thinking habit because it means a lack of associative material for the mind's use. If we really wish to develop these large and basal factors of our education, a good vocabulary, a good use of language, and a good thinking habit, we shall cultivate intimacy with dictionaries years on end. Lack of associative material, that is indeed a tremendous handicap on any man who wants to think clearly, accurately, and alertly, who wants to use his mind for the proper performance of his everyday task, the winning of happiness, and the attaining of some ambition. The more ideas we have in our mind, the more precise our understanding of these ideas, then the more clearly, accurately, and alertly we can think. For thinking is essentially a process of associating or linking ideas together. If the ideas are few or if their meaning to us is hazy, the associative process necessarily is hampered. Hence, in chief part, the great importance of our knowing the exact meaning of words, those convenient symbolic representatives of ideas. Every time we come upon a word that is new to us and are too lazy to ascertain its meaning, we are robbing ourselves of some of the stuff of which sound thinking is made. This places us at a serious disadvantage in dealing with men better equipped for thinking than we are. We wonder why they outstrip us. We wonder why we lag behind on the road of life. Patient, persistent use of a dictionary would go far to help us speed up. Of course, when we read away from home, we cannot always have immediate access to our dictionary, but we can at least make a note of the new, unfamiliar words so as to look up their meaning at our convenience. This, to be sure, will put us to some trouble, but it will be trouble of a most profitable kind. It will have the effect of lodging in the subconscious, the storehouse and factory of our mind, an ever greater fund of exact knowledge, on which through association of ideas we can draw both consciously and subconsciously for the realization of our hopes, the attainment of our ambitions. Still further, there are those who sadly limit their powers of expression and of thinking by addiction to the use of slang words and phrases. Slang is defended by some on the score of its crispness, directness, and picturesqueness. But the fact remains that it is an adverse influence on the one indulging in it. It breeds carelessness in more things than the use of words, and it tends to restrict sadly the slang addict's general vocabulary. He may have a startling extensive vocabulary of slang, but if his vocabulary of regular words is studied, it will almost certainly be found to include only a few hundred words, not always used correctly. This means a distinct limitation of thinking as well as of speaking and writing. Equally mischievous in another way is habitual and excessive use of superlatives. This is symptomatic of a real defect in reasoning power, and may even be symptomatic of weakness in nerve control. The one who habitually defaces reality by extremes of expression pointedly comments a veteran specialist in the statement of nervous disorders, if not already nervous, is traveling nervousward. And elaborating, he goes on, quote, if the neurotic would mend the error of his mental ways, he will early learn that extravagance of speech stands for distortion of thought, that clear, logical thinking is hurt by inordinate expression, and he will rapidly eliminate his superlatives and many of his comparatives. Beastly weather, insufferably hot, terrible pains, unutterable bores, nights without a wink of sleep, splitting headaches, the worst evers, and the whole vocabulary of inaccuracy must give way to temperance and fairness and honesty in description. End quote. Also, without appreciating it, the victim of the superlative habit may work nervous damage in other people. To quote the warning of another authority, quote, the temperamental talker is one of the greatest of nerve destroyers. He deals in superlatives. He views everything emotionally. He talks feeling of trifles. He gushes. He flatters. To him everything is wonderful, prodigious, superb, gorgeous, heavenly, amazing, indescribable, overwhelming. Extravagance and exaggeration permeate his most commonplace observations." End quote. Footnote: R.S. Carroll, The Mastery of Nervousness, and G. Kleiser, Talks on Talking. End footnote. Which necessarily gets very much on other people's nerves. And unhappily, the world abounds in dealers in superlatives. There is no dodging them. They pop up unexpectedly in the streets, in streetcars, wherever people are to be found in any number. Their conversation may at first seem amusing, but soon it grows intolerable, and often conditions are such that one cannot flee from them, much though one longs to do so. Boredom, fatigue, irritability are what they create in all obliged to listen to them for any length of time. They themselves are wasting nervous force, which they cannot well spare. Now it may happen that you who read these lines are yourself unconsciously addicted to overindulgence in the use of words that dazzle and unduly emphasize. If so, break yourself of the habit without delay. Do not banish superlatives entirely from your vocabulary, but learn to use them only when they rightfully should be used. This will mean effort. It will mean patient study of yourself, your language tendencies. But you may rest assured that the mental discipline involved will greatly aid your intellectual growth in general, and may be of real helpfulness in the conquest of known or unsuspected weaknesses. As verbal extravagance lessens, poise will more and more surely come, the poise of that self-mastery and self-control to which all should aspire. End of chapter. And just when we thought this book couldn't get any better. All right, my dear one, please do hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let's head over to the next video where I will meet you there with How to Talk Well.